Hello guys, it's Fitball here, and today we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic. The most controversial of topics in modern football, I might say. Is VAR ruining football? Nah, of course it's not. But who is ruining football then? Well, let me show you the culprit. That's right, it was all David Martindale's fault. Every last decision, everything wrong with modern football is David Martindale's fault. It's definitely nothing to do with VAR or VAR. Definitely not. Just look at this poor man after David Martindale chopped off one of his goals, or toes, or did something. No, you know what, I can't order this anymore. Yes, VAR is a cancer on modern football, and I don't think that's up for debate. It completely ruins all, joy that you might find from, scoring a goal, or clearing the ball, or heading the ball out. All of a sudden, the game stops and you are bricking it. And look at this guy. His shirt was white when he went in. It's now brown. But I know what you're thinking. It's there to police the game. But I suppose the question is it policing too much? Is it taking away from some of the aspect of, uncertainty around football and the excitement and unpredictability? I mean, look at these guys. Look how excited they are. Well, some of them are excited. Some of them look very stern. But this is football. Joy. But has it come as a consequence of over-policing? Quite possibly. I mean, but, when we're talking about VAR and what it's good for, I'd say this is an example of what it's bad for. And I'll get into as to why. But this is an incident from last night, and I think everybody knows it by now. It's 95th minute, Motherwell versus Celtic. Celtic 3 points behind Hearts, one game left.
The foul, whatever you want to call
this
it,
would have put it in completely in Hearts' court.
Now,
but
you got a couple questions. Is it actually a handball? Is it not a handball? Now this is a quarter of the speed, and this is a screen recording from Sky Sports official YouTube channel without audio. So please don't have any problems with this video. So referee's going over, John Beaton. He's going over to check. Now he's seen what we've just seen, and he doesn't know if it's a penalty or not. However, the problem is VAR only shows this incident really. It doesn't show a repeat of the build-up, the contact. But could we say this hits his hand? Maybe. But can you say for absolute certainty it's hit his hand and it's a clear and obvious error? I don't think so. However, he deems this as enough. And now you're looking at this right now and you're getting a better picture than what he got when he was seeing it, because he took a quarter of the time to decide, because this is at a quarter of the speed. So please bear that in mind.
this here is a still from just before any form of contact takes place between the alleged hand and the ball. There's not really much you can say about this, however it just gives a bit of context as to what's happening from a slightly different angle, which I think is important to take into account, especially decisions of extreme magnitude such as these. But also I think for all decisions like this, you should take into account other angles rather than just one, which I think is where a lot of problems come under for this decision. So then if we zoom in slightly again, it doesn't help you much. However, I want to just comment slightly on the angle of the defender's arm. We're just going to call it that for now. The angle of the defender's arm, because that does come into play a little bit later on. But also, if we look at where the Motherwell defender's arm and hand is, you can see the shadow is over the left side of his face. Now this is important because the angle at which he's coming in, he is essentially side on to the floodlight. So that means that at this angle, his hand is not in front of his face currently. His arm isn't in front of his face, his arm in his hand is to the side, which I think is quite important to know at this point. And then here, this is a slightly different angle, but this is more so the moment of impact between wherever the ball has hit. And now what you can say is, well, it doesn't look as though the ball is, immediately in contact with anything. However, even if it is, can we chalk that down to contact from the attacking player? Possibly, but that's not what we're saying just now. But from this, it's not really immediately obvious if it has definitely hit his hand or not from this still frame, but it quite possibly has. So believe it is, it's likely. Here is the still image that BBC Sport have essentially published. So this is what the decision was based on. And now you could look at the previous one and say it maybe showed more conclusive evidence of it hitting his arm. If you look at this, you can't conclusively say it's hit his arm because you don't know where his hand actually is. You don't know if that is his hand just behind it or if that's his hair, just because of the complexion. So I don't think from the angle you can say it's a clear and obvious error, as I've already mentioned. But now we're going to look at it as more of a sort of frame by frame in terms of the angle that VAR used. So we're going to look at it and we're going to see sort of what's happening in terms of contact between defenders and attackers and arm positioning. So this is the first frame that we've got. You can see the ball is coming in towards the defender. There is contact from another Motherwell defender. Quite interesting contact, but there is contact there. But it's important to note the angle of the Motherwell defender's arm at this point. It is, his forearm is perpendicular to his bicep, we'll call it for now. So his arm is straight up. And now why this happens? Well, when you jump up for a header, you use your arms. You put your arms up. And it's likely that his arm is extended further up due to him not wanting to collide with the Celtic attacker, Trusty, his face at the point, because he knows that would be a penalty. So he's likely lifted it up higher. Now this is it's a bit of an annoying one because he lifted it higher to try and avoid a foul, and he's made himself very susceptible to giving away a foul. But let's look at the angle of his arm and also the positioning of Trusty's shoulder. Now we'll look at the next frame and we can see here that his arm, this is still before contact, that his arm is no longer perpendicular to his bicep. His bicep is slightly lifted. You can see his elbow is a little bit more raised. Trusty's shoulder is now moved forward as well as coming up, and you can see that the Motherwell's forearm is now angled more towards his head. And now this is purely due to the contact from Trusty. Now bear in mind, Trusty gets nothing on the ball, so it then becomes a case of, is this enough force or contact to justify it as a foul? Maybe, maybe not. From still images, you can never really tell. And from the angles we've got, we can never really tell. But from this, what you can see is that the Motherwell's defender, his arm has essentially gotten closer to the ball due to the attacking player's movement, which you could say is good attacking play. So with the good attacking play in mind, he's done enough to put the defender off, you could say. And this is the moment of contact. So, you can see it is likely this his hand or his arm. You kind of see his fingers, but it's just, is it enough? And the other thing is, because of the speed of the review, have VAR taken everything into account? So I think we could say that this is a possible handball. But can you overturn an on-field decision for a possible handball? And also bearing in mind is there contact? That is a very, very, very important part. And when I'm talking about contact here, I mean in between the defender and attacker, because he's not got the ball. So, is that a foul on the Motherwell defender? it'd be a bit soft. And then here's just the next frame that just gives a bit more context as to where the Motherwell's defender's hand is, and you can see it is kind of on top of his head. But again, from this angle, we cannot say whether or not it's bounced off his head or it's bounced off his hand. Now, if it's bounced off his forearm, it is likely to have this trajectory as well as it bouncing off his head. If it's bounced off his hand, however, as in his actual hand, it's unlikely to have this trajectory. But again, we can see Trusty's still being physical in and amongst it, and they're sort of coming down at this point, which is also important to note. If I jump up for something and there's something in my way, my hand is less likely to be able to come down due to the attacker or defender or whatever, due to someone else's presence. You can't just sort of phase through something. It's a solid object, so potential obstruction, one could argue. But VAR's entire purpose is to, make sure the correct decisions are come to. Now, this is an example of a game earlier on in the season against Braga. When Celtic played Braga, this was a goal that was chopped off for Celtic because VAR couldn't say for certain it did not touch Kelechi Iheanacho's arm. And now why this is interesting is because the on-field decision was goal, and so they said because we don't have video proof of it not hitting his arm, we cannot allow the on-field decision to stand. That is definitely over-policing. But is that sort of similar? So if we want to say that VAR should be used for clear and obvious errors, VAR shouldn't have chopped this off because it isn't clear that it's hit off his hand. And so in a similar vein, from the angles that VAR had at its disposal at the Celtic versus Motherwell game, can we say it's definitively hit off his hand? And even if you can say that, can you say definitively there isn't enough pressure or fouling going on between Trusty and the Motherwell defender? And I suppose if you can say for 100% certain that, that there's a handball and there's not enough force or there's not enough fouling going on, if you can say that, you can say, okay, you can give a penalty. But from what we've seen last night, and we've seen the uproar from it, there isn't enough to say that. And I think that's where the biggest problem comes in this case. And, another problem, of course, comes from, what the handball rules actually are. I mean, nobody really understands what is a handball and what isn't a handball. UEFA games and European football are, refereed to a completely different standard, and I wouldn't even say it's better. But, the most relevant thing here is the third paragraph, statement. It says, the current official SFA guidelines state that having the hand or arm above shoulder height is rarely a natural position and a player is taking a risk. And so I agree. In this case, the Motherwell defender does take a risk by having his arm that high. But you then have to look at it as saying, is it a natural position for the specific area or the specific context of this situation? When the defender's there and putting any form of force on you, does it then become a natural position because you already have your hands up to balance because you don't have wings to balance midair? So it kind of then is a natural position, if that makes sense, because you can't go through objects. So to me there's too much sort of inconsistencies, and VAR could be used good, it could be used great even. However, the referees use VAR as though it's still just their opinion, and VAR will only work if you have set benchmarks to go against, as in certain contexts. If that occurs, no penalty, or there has to be a penalty, and every single referee has to give it. And when I say this, I mean VAR just has to be a team of essentially independent referees who aren't the same as the normal referees, and these referees just give their judgment and referee the game based off of strict sort of set standard. Not it could be, not it's your interpretation, it's either it's clear and obvious or it isn't. And if it isn't, you play on with whatever the on-field decision is. However, maybe VAR should go to the same place that Mr. Martindale is currently residing. Actually, hang on. He got a promotion upstairs to a nice cushy chair. Now, I don't think his chair's pink for, anyone wondering. It might be, but I don't think it is. I do think that David Martindale will be going apoplectic about this decision though. But where should David Martindale potentially be according to some fans in the world? Well, maybe the correct decision. He seems like a sound guy. This is where Davey should be. And see, he's with his guitar. Davey would be in there with the VAR box. It works perfectly. But no, I think VAR needs to go. And I don't think there's much of a question about that. I think VAR, it came in and it was a great idea, but it's getting too much wrong. It just doesn't seem to be compatible with camera angles, with camera quality as we're seeing. And there's just too many questions. It's supposed to get rid of the ambiguity of decisions, yet it's just made decisions worse. So for that, I think it should go. Could it work under set parameters? Yeah, but it's not under set parameters. It's too personalised, it's too opinionated, and that's the biggest problem.